I walked into my daughter's engagement party thinking, maybe, just maybe, this was her way of letting me back in, of saying, Dad, you still matter. But the second I stepped through the door, a waiter shoved a tray into my hands and whispered, back to the kitchen. Servants don't belong here. And when I looked up, I saw her mother, my ex-wife, nodding in agreement. I was about to leave in silence, humiliated, until a voice cut through the room like a crack of thunder. That's the man who saved my company. Suddenly, every eye turned. The air shifted, and in that frozen moment, my entire family was forced to see the man they'd spent years trying to forget. What happened next was rather unexpected. I will tell you everything. First, let me thank you for your continuous support. If you love stories like this one, support us by subscribing to this channel and comment where you are watching us from. It will be great to hear from you. Now let's jump into the details of what happened. I always hated the smell of expensive paper. That thick, embossed kind that tries too hard to feel important between your fingers. Pretentious, really. So when I opened the cream-colored envelope that arrived in the mail with my name scribbled in neat, impersonal cursive, I knew before I even read the card inside that it wasn't going to feel like a warm gesture. It wasn't joy or excitement that curled in my chest. It was the same dull ache that had been with me for the past 8 years, ever since the divorce, ever since Lily, my daughter, started looking at me like I was someone she used to know. The invitation was for her engagement party. Not the wedding, not yet, but a formal celebration, hosted at the Harrington estate, which already told me more than I wanted to know about her fiancé. I didn't recognize the name, Marcus Harrington, but the location was enough. That estate had made it into local magazines for its botanical garden and 2-story glass ballroom. Not the kind of place you rent for a backyard barbecue and family hugs. No, this was meant to impress. I ran my thumb along the edge of the card. It was heavy, metallic lettering stamped across it. Mr. and Mrs. William Harrington, along with Deborah Carson, request the honor of your presence. My name wasn't mentioned. Not even a father of the bride acknowledgement. Just my ex-wife, taking credit as always. Still, I went. I went because I'm her father. Because there was a time when Lily used to run down the stairs into my arms, smelling like strawberry shampoo and cookie dough, calling me her hero. I held on to that girl. Even though the woman she'd become rarely called and only messaged when she needed alone. Maybe, I thought, this party was her way of reaching out. Maybe this was her way of saying, you matter. God, I was stupidly hopeful. I should back up. I'm Richard Cole. I used to own a small chain of restaurants before the pandemic hit. When the dust cleared, I had sold most of them to keep the lights on for my staff. I didn't walk away rich, but I walked away respected. Since then, I've done quiet consulting gigs for hospitality businesses, fixing menus, streamlining back-of-house operations, training managers on how not to burn their kitchens down during Friday rush. Nothing flashy, but honest work. And if there's one thing I've always held on to, it's my pride in doing things the right way. I didn't cheat people. I didn't cut corners. I didn't pretend to be someone I wasn't. Deborah, on the other hand, she traded up the moment we split. Went from teacher's aide to real estate stager to trophy girlfriend of a millionaire in the span of 3 years. I don't begrudge her success. Hell, she's got ambition. I'll give her that. But she learned early how to scrub off the parts of her past that didn't shine. That included me. And eventually, it included the version of Lily that still had my fingerprints. The party was set for a Saturday afternoon. Fall. The kind of day where the sun's still warm, but the wind has a bite to it. I ironed a blazer, pulled out my only pair of decent dress shoes, and left early enough to account for traffic. I brought a gift too, handwritten card, crystal frame for one of their engagement photos, and a bottle of wine from a vineyard I used to do business with. Nothing flashy, but thoughtful. I still remember checking my appearance in the rearview mirror before I stepped out of the car, giving myself a pep talk like some sad teenager before prom. You're her dad, I muttered to myself. She invited you. Don't expect too much, just be there. But the second I reached the entrance of the estate, I felt it. That old familiar tension. The kind that curls behind your neck like someone pulling a thread too tight. No one greeted me. No usher, no family member. Just a valet who looked confused I didn't hand him keys to a luxury car. I walked up the stone steps alone, past past fountains and marble statues that looked like they cost more than my first restaurant. Inside, everything gleamed. White tablecloths, hanging orchids, gold-rimmed glassware, waitstaff in black ties, and white gloves moved like chess pieces across a board I didn't understand anymore. I paused by the entrance, unsure where to go. A few people glanced at me and looked away quickly, not rudely, just like I didn't register. Then a waiter, a young guy, probably early 20s, approached with a tray of hors d'oeuvres. I smiled politely, about to take one, but instead of offering the food, he leaned in and whispered so quietly I almost didn't hear. Back to the kitchen. Servants don't belong here. I stared at him, blinked. At first, I thought it was a joke, some absurd mistake. But he wasn't joking. He looked at me like I was out of place, like I had wandered where I didn't belong. I opened my mouth, about to respond, when I caught sight of Deborah across the room. She saw me, of that I'm sure. Our eyes locked, and then, with a slow, deliberate nod, she turned away. Not shocked, not even embarrassed, just satisfied, like the whole thing had gone according to plan. That's when it hit me. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't some random waiter making a mistake. I wasn't meant to be seen here. I was meant to be background, an afterthought, or worse, staff. I stood there, frozen in my spot, still holding the unopened bottle of wine and the small gift bag. I couldn't move, couldn't think. Just this sinking feeling, like I'd walked into a movie halfway through only to realize the villain already won. And the hero? Well, he didn't even make the casting list. I clenched my jaw, trying to swallow down the shame rising in my throat. My hands itched. My heart pounded, not with rage, yet, but with humiliation. The kind that makes you feel 12 years old again, getting laughed at for bringing the wrong lunch to school. But this wasn't school. This was my daughter's engagement party, and I wasn't even seen as a guest. And yet, just as I was turning to leave, hard in my shoes, a voice boomed across the hall. Wait a damn minute. That's the man who saved my company. The room froze. Everyone turned. I hadn't moved. I was still standing there with that godforsaken tray in one hand and the gift bag in the other when that voice rang out. Loud, clear, and impossible to ignore. Wait a damn minute. That's the man who saved my company. Heads turned like a gust of wind had swept through the room. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Glasses hovered mid-air. It was like someone had paused the entire evening and hit rewind. All the eyes that had just skimmed past me like I was furniture now latched on, curious and alert. The man speaking was already halfway across the ballroom. He was broad-shouldered, salt and pepper hair combed back, wearing a dark blue suit that probably cost more than my truck. His voice echoed with disbelief and something else, gratitude. I recognized him before he reached me. Mark Langston, Deborah's boyfriend. I'd only seen him in business articles and local interviews. One of those polished, media-friendly executives who always smiled with his teeth, but kept his cards close to the vest. We'd met once, briefly, when his logistics firm had nearly gone under 3 years ago. He never knew my full name then. Just that a consultant came in, looked at his books, and pulled off a minor miracle. Now he was striding toward me like I was a celebrity. Richard Cole, he said, gripping my hand in both of his. Son of a gun, I can't believe this. I had no idea you were. Wait, how do you know Deborah? The irony made me want to laugh and cry all at once. I used to be married to her, I said quietly. Mark blinked. You're Lily's father? I nodded, still numb. He turned toward the room, raising his voice again. This man, right here, is the only reason Langston Freight is still standing. I never got to thank him properly. And just like that, I was no longer invisible. People started to murmur. I heard my name whispered across the room. A woman in a green satin dress gasped and said, Wait, the restaurant guy? I've read about you. A man in a tux clapped me on the back like we were old friends. Even the waiter who had whispered that demeaning order earlier looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Deborah. Oh, Deborah. I turned slowly to find her standing by the champagne fountain. Her smile had vanished. Her expression was stone-cold panic, though she tried to smooth it out into something neutral. She stepped forward, fake laughing, trying to wedge herself into the moment. Yes, well, Richard has always been quite resourceful. But Mark wasn't listening to her. He was still focused on me. I don't know what kind of favor you're doing showing up here, but you need a seat at the head table, he said. I mean that. You're not just a guest, you're family. Family. The word hit me like a punch to the chest. Not because he said it, but because of how empty it sounded coming from someone I barely knew, and how bitter it tasted when the people I should have heard it from had spent the whole day pretending I didn't exist. I appreciate that, I said, voice level. But I think there's been a misunderstanding. I turned back to the tray I'd been handed. The damn thing was still in my hand. I set it down gently on a nearby table, wiping my palm on the side of my blazer. Mark frowned. What happened? Ask your waiter, I said. Or better yet, ask Deborah. His brows furrowed. He looked between us, clearly picking up on the tension now that the noise had quieted. And finally, Lily appeared. She came rushing in from somewhere deeper in the estate, holding the hand of a tall, square-jawed man who must have been Marcus, her fiancé. Her eyes flicked from me to Mark, to the circle forming around us. She smiled nervously, like a child caught in a lie. Dad, she said, her voice strained. You made it. I stared at her. It was such a simple sentence. But the weight behind it? It was crushing, like I'd just crashed a party she hoped I'd decline. I did, I said steady. Wasn't sure I should have. Her fiancé stepped forward, offering a handshake. I'm Marcus. It's great to finally meet you, Mr. Cole. Lily's told me a lot. I shook his hand. Firm grip. Too firm. The kind that tries too hard to establish dominance. I nodded, but I didn't smile. Not yet. Mark, still watching closely, cleared his throat. There's something strange going on here. When Richard arrived, one of the waiters told him to go to the kitchen. Called him a servant. Deborah, you seemed okay with that. Can someone explain? Deborah turned bright red. It was a misunderstanding. The waiter thought, he thought. You nodded, I said. Calm. Clear. He said I didn't belong here, and you nodded. Lily's mouth opened, then closed again. I turned to her. Tell me the truth, Lily. Did you invite me expecting I wouldn't come? Or did you invite me to make a point, to remind everyone you've outgrown where you came from? Her eyes filled, not with tears, but with shame. Or maybe it was just discomfort. She wasn't used to being cornered. I knew that look. Deborah used to wear it every time someone questioned her curated version of reality. I didn't think you'd show, she finally admitted, voice cracking. And when you did, I didn't know what to say. Everything was already set up. I laughed. A short, bitter sound. So it's true, I said. You were embarrassed. Of me. Of who I am. No, she said quickly. It's not that. You wouldn't understand how people in this world see things. I didn't want it to be awkward. Awkward, I repeated. You mean like being told to go to the kitchen at your daughter's engagement party? That one hit. Marcus stepped in, trying to defuse the moment. Let's all just calm down, okay? Maybe this got a little out of hand. But I wasn't finished. I looked at Lily, really looked at her. The soft curls she used to hate as a child were now pinned perfectly in place. Her dress cost more than a month's rent. Her nails were manicured. Her smile was practiced. But I could still see my little girl in there, underneath all the polish. The one who used to sit on my prep table, swinging her legs and asking me what made garlic smell sweet when it hit hot oil. You can't scrub the past off just because it's not convenient anymore, I said. I've never been ashamed of where I came from, of what I do. But you, I stopped myself. Lily reached out, but I stepped back. No, you made your choice. Mark finally spoke again, quieter this time. I didn't know any of this. Deborah, if I had. You didn't want to know? I cut in. You saw the version of this family she let you see. But that's okay. You've seen more now. The silence that followed was suffocating. Then I picked up my gift bag, still unopened, and placed it on a nearby table. I won't stay, I said. Wouldn't want to make it awkward. I left through the front doors without looking back. Outside, the air felt different. Colder, yes, but real. Crisp and honest. Like the wind didn't care what shoes you wore or who you were trying to impress. I walked back to my truck and sat there for a long time before turning the key. And for the first time that day, I felt like myself again. I drove for a while before I even knew where I was going. The roads blurred by, fall leaves curling off tree limbs like little yellow confessions. The sky a shade of blue that felt too cheerful for how my gut churned. I wasn't angry. Not anymore. That would have been easier to process. What I felt was something uglier, grief. Grief for a relationship that used to mean everything to me. Grief for the father I had once been and the daughter who used to call me her whole world. I ended up at the overlook near Mill Creek, the one Lily and I used to visit when she was a kid. We'd eat drive-through burgers on the hood of the car, watch the sun slide down behind the trees. She used to rest her head on my shoulder and ask me if I thought stars were just holes in heaven's floor. That girl felt a million lifetimes away now. I sat there in silence, replaying the moment Mark called out my name, how the entire room pivoted like I'd grown two heads. Not because I was Lily's father, not because I was a part of her life, but because I had value to someone else. That was what turned their heads. Recognition, reputation, not love. It was the kind of realization that makes your chest hollow out. I didn't hear from Lily that night. Not a call, not even a text. But by the next morning, it started. First, it was an email from someone I didn't know. Mr. Cole, I was at the Harrington event yesterday. I just wanted to say how appalled I was by how you were treated. You carried yourself with grace. My husband owns a few restaurants, and we're looking for a consultant. I deleted it. Politely. I wasn't interested in networking off of pity. Then came the text from my sister, Janine. Janine, Ricky, I saw the clip on Facebook. You okay? That which let them treat you like a waiter. A clip. My stomach dropped. I hadn't even realized someone filmed it. Sure enough, by that afternoon, the whole mess had made the rounds, mostly among our extended circle. A 42-second video. Me, standing with the tray. The waiter's words muffled but clear enough. Mark shouting out my name. Deborah's face when she realized what had happened. It was all there. Public. Permanent. And strangely vindicating. By Sunday, Lily finally texted me. Lily, can we meet? No apology. Just 3 words. Short. Hesitant. I didn't reply immediately. I let it sit. Let her feel the weight of waiting for once. I met her 2 days later, at a diner not far from my place. She chose it. I think it was some half-hearted attempt at nostalgia. Chrome stools, vinyl booths, jukebox that hadn't worked in years. She was already seated when I walked in, fidgeting with the straw in her water glass. She stood when she saw me, but I didn't hug her. I slid into the booth across from her and waited. She looked different without the glitter. More like herself. Or at least, closer to the version I remembered. Still beautiful, but smaller. Less composed. I didn't know it was being recorded, she said first. That's what you lead with? I asked. She looked down. I didn't mean for it to go that way. You didn't stop it from going that way either. Silence. She took a shaky breath. I was scared. Of what people would think. Of how you'd seem next to Marcus's family. They're very polished. And I'm not, I said. Say it. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. I watched her struggle with herself. She wanted to spin this. Make it palatable. But I wasn't offering her a soft place to land. You know, I said, leaning back. I spent years showing up for you when no one else did. Piano lessons, dentist appointments, field trips, you name it. I cooked for your entire 6th grade class when your teacher forgot the potluck. I picked you up from every party where you felt too anxious to stay. I watched you fall asleep in the back seat more times than I can count. And I did all that not because I wanted praise, but because I loved you. Her eyes welled up, finally. I never asked you to be anyone but yourself. I continued. But you needed me to be someone else. Someone who didn't remind you of where you came from. You wanted to erase me, Lily. No, Dad. That's not. She reached for my hand. I pulled it back. It is, I said quietly. You were okay with me being your bank account. Your silent supporter. As long as I didn't show up where people could see me. She wiped her cheek. I was stupid. I know that. I didn't think it would play out like that. I thought if I just kept it quiet, it would be easier. For who? I asked. She had no answer. I let the silence stretch. Then I said something I hadn't even realized I meant until the words left my mouth. I'm not coming to the wedding. Her eyes widened. What? I won't be there, I said again. Not like this. Not as a prop. Not as someone you're embarrassed of. If you ever want a relationship with me again, it'll have to be on different terms. You're punishing me? She asked, voice trembling. No, I said. I'm finally choosing me. The bill came. I paid it before she could argue, dropped a tip on the table, and stood up. I love you, I said. But I also love myself. And I'm done sitting at tables where I'm only invited as decoration. As I walked out of that diner, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel relieved. I felt like something inside me had finally cracked open, and I was letting the rot drain out. And that was its own kind of healing. I didn't hear from Lily for 2 weeks. Not a word. Not a call. Not even a forwarded meme or one of those empty, just checking in texts she used to send when she wanted to keep up the illusion of connection. Silence had settled between us like smoke after a house fire. Everything still smoldering, but too much damage to ignore. It wasn't just her silence that hurt. It was how familiar it felt. After the divorce, that's how it started. First it was fewer calls, then shorter visits. Then birthdays where she was too busy. Holidays spent at Deborah's country club functions instead of with me. At the time, I chalked it up to adolescence. Growing up. But deep down, I'd always known it wasn't just that. It was shame. Lily didn't want her friends to know her dad smelled like fryer oil most days, or that he drove a beat-up Silverado and came home with burns on his forearms. She wanted polish, clean edges. And when Deborah married into money, it became easy to paint me as the past, a chapter that didn't quite fit into the hardcover edition of her new life. But what she didn't realize, what none of them realized, was that even if I wore an apron and scraped grease off a flat top at 2 a.m., I still had dignity. And now that I'd drawn a line, they didn't know what to do with me. The real escalation came at a family gathering I hadn't planned to attend. Janine, my sister, hosted a barbecue the following weekend. She called me 3 times to make sure I was coming. "You need to be there, Ricky. Show your face. Don't let them freeze you out." I didn't want to go, but I was tired of shrinking. So I showed up, plate of smoked brisket in hand, and walked into a backyard full of sideways glances. Deborah was there. Of course she was. She stood in a sun hat near the patio, a glass of wine in one hand, holding court with some distant cousins who didn't know the whole story. When she saw me, she stiffened, then turned away sharply. She'd always been better at pretending. Lily was there, too. Sitting by the fire pit with Marcus, laughing too loudly at something he said. It sounded forced. I caught her eye once, just once, and in that instant I saw it. The flicker of guilt. The awareness. But she looked away before I could hold her gaze. Fine. I mingled. Ate. Talked with Janine and her husband. Swapped stories with my nephew about his latest job search. And then, out of nowhere, it happened. Marcus stood and tapped his glass with a fork. "I just want to say a quick thank you to everyone for being here. We're so excited about the wedding, and we feel incredibly lucky to be surrounded by such amazing family and friends." Polite applause. Then he added, "And of course, we're especially grateful to Deborah, who has gone above and beyond in helping with the planning. Honestly, she's been like the glue holding everything together." More applause. I waited. No mention of me. Not even a neutral, and to both our families. I wasn't just unacknowledged, I was erased. Lily didn't speak up. She didn't even flinch. It was deliberate. A decision. I felt the heat rise in my chest, and for a moment, I debated whether to say something. Call it out right then and there. But I didn't. I just stood up, set my plate down, and started walking toward the house. That's when Janine intercepted me. "Ricky, wait." I paused. She looked at me with that mix of sympathy and sisterly fire I knew too well. "You gonna let them do this again?" I already said what I had to say, I told her. She's made her choice. She folded her arms. "You think she's not scared out of her mind right now? You embarrassed her in front of all her new little rich friends. You showed the real you, and she doesn't know what to do with that." I laughed, bitter. "So I'm supposed to make it easy for her?" "No," she said. "You're supposed to make it clear. Right now, she's stuck between her pride and her guilt. And the longer you stay quiet, the easier it is for her to pretend none of it happened." I didn't say anything, but Janine's words stayed with me. I left the barbecue early. 3 days later, Lily called. This time, she left a voicemail. "Hey, Dad. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, and maybe I deserve that. But I messed up. I know I did, and I don't even know how to begin fixing it. But I miss you. I miss us. Please don't shut me out completely." I listened to that voicemail 3 times. Each time, it landed differently. First, I heard the guilt. Then, the regret. But the third time, I heard something else, fear. Not fear of losing me. Fear of losing the version of herself she'd carefully constructed. The one that could only stand tall if I stayed small. And that's when I knew. She wasn't ready to change. Not really. I didn't call her back. Not yet. Because silence can cut both ways. And this time, it was my turn to let it speak. It's strange how you can feel more like a stranger in places that used to feel like home. That thought circled my mind the night I got the email. It was from Deborah, of all people. Short, clipped, painfully formal. Richard, Lily is having a small wedding planning dinner this Saturday at the Lancaster. She would appreciate your attendance. Marcus's parents will be there, as will several planners and vendors. Please RSVP if you plan to come. Deborah. No warmth. No apology. No, we'd like to see you. Just an obligation. A transactional olive branch. I stared at the screen for a long time, debating. The Lancaster was one of the fanciest places in the city, a place where the butter came in delicate curls and the waiters made you feel like you owed them a favor. I knew the type of people they were trying to impress, and I knew my presence would be more about optics than reconciliation. But I went. Not for them. Not even for Lily, really. I went for me. I needed to walk into that room and know that I could leave it on my own terms, with my dignity intact. Not humiliated. Not used. Just whole. The Lancaster was everything I remembered. Soft jazz playing overhead. White linen tablecloths. Chandeliers dripping crystals like frozen rain. The maitre d' recognized my name, probably flagged in the system, and led me through a long corridor to a private room tucked behind gold-paneled doors. Inside were 12 people seated around a long table. Deborah, Lily, Marcus, his parents, the wedding planner, a florist, and some man taking notes I assumed was the photographer. Everyone looked up when I entered. Deborah's smile was automatic, tight. Richard, she said. You made it. Lily didn't stand. She just nodded, eyes darting to Marcus, as if asking silently, is this okay? Sorry I'm late, I said. Traffic. A lie. I'd sat in the parking lot for 20 minutes rehearsing what I would and wouldn't say. The only open seat was between Deborah and Marcus's father, a man who smelled like cedar cologne and entitlement. I took my place without speaking and waited. Dinner passed like a slow-motion photo shoot. Lily showed swatches of fabric. The florist droned on about peonies. Marcus's mother mentioned her spa's loyalty program at least 4 times. The whole thing felt like a board meeting for a company I hadn't invested in. No one asked for my opinion. No one asked how I was. I was invisible again. Until dessert. The server cleared our plates and brought out a tiny stack of almond tarts dusted with powdered sugar. Deborah dabbed her mouth with a napkin, then said casually, well, I think everything's on track. The Harringtons have been incredibly generous with the budget. She paused, then looked at me. And of course, Richard will be handling the rehearsal dinner. It wasn't a question. It was a public announcement. A scripted expectation. Lily didn't flinch. Neither did Marcus. It had been planned. I stared at her, stunned. Come again. Deborah smiled with the edge of a knife. You still have connections in food service. We figured you could cater it. Or at least organize the team. Something rustic and charming. Your style. Something inside me cracked. The same way a dam gives way when it's been held too long under pressure. I looked at Lily. Did you ask me? She opened her mouth. Closed it. Then tried again. We assumed you'd want to be involved. Involved, I repeated. As in, cook for the people who didn't want me at their table? Marcus cleared his throat. It's not like that, sir. You're just really good at what you do. I snapped my gaze to him. What I do isn't the issue. It's what you think I'm worth, that is. Silence. All eyes on me. I stood up. I'm not a vendor, I said. I'm not your background detail. I'm not the man who quietly pays and shuts up. I'm your father. And if that doesn't earn me a seat at this table, not as a chef, not as a helper, but as family, then I'm done. Lily's face crumpled. Dad, please. No, I said. Don't cry now. Not after you sat through this entire dinner and said nothing. Not after you let your mother speak for me. Again. Deborah scoffed. This is exactly why I didn't want you involved. You always make things about you. I turned to her slowly, years of restraint boiling just under the surface. No, I said. You made it about status. About control. You've always needed someone beneath you to feel big. You tried to erase me from Lily's life, but you couldn't. And now you can't stand that I won't beg for scraps anymore. She said nothing. No one did. I looked back at my daughter. I will always love you, Lily. But I will not stand in the wings while you rewrite me into something I'm not. You want me at your wedding? Fine. But I come as your father. Not your caterer. Not your charity case. Your father. She said nothing. And that was all I needed to know. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the check I'd brought. $5,000 for the honeymoon fund. I'd planned to give it quietly, a small gesture of support. I tore it in half, then in quarters, and placed the pieces on the white linen table in front of me. No one moved. I left without another word. Outside, the air was sharp. It smelled like rain on hot pavement, that scent of something clean cutting through the rot. I walked to my truck slowly, breathing deeper than I had in months. There were no cameras, no applause, just me, alone, but not small. I hadn't burned a bridge. I'd built a boundary. And this time, I was the one drawing the lines. It's been 3 months since the dinner at the Lancaster. Since I tore up that check and walked out of a room where I was more decoration than dad. I haven't spoken to Lily since. Not once. She didn't call. I didn't reach out. And while that silence used to feel like a punishment, it doesn't anymore. It feels like a mirror, and I've stopped looking into it, hoping to see something other than the truth. The wedding came and went. I didn't attend. I didn't send a gift. I didn't even check the social media posts that trickled down the family grapevine. I didn't want to know how beautiful the ceremony was, or how many times Marcus's parents were thanked in speeches, or whether Deborah cried with joy walking Lily down the aisle in my place. I didn't want the details, because they didn't matter. What mattered was what I didn't do. I didn't show up for a version of myself that didn't exist anymore. I didn't shrink. I didn't beg. And for the first time in years, I chose peace over proximity. The old me would have caved. He would have told himself, be the bigger person. It's her day. Don't ruin it. He would have stood at the edge of the reception, smiling politely, pretending not to notice how his name never made it into the program or how the photographer kept cropping him out of group shots. But that man died somewhere between the waiter's insult and Deborah's smug nod. He died quietly, right there in that ballroom, tray in hand. What's left now is a man who knows his worth. Not because someone powerful stood up and said it out loud. That helped, sure. Mark Langston's recognition that day cracked the surface. But what sealed the change was what came after. The realization that even when the mask fell, even when the truth stood naked in the middle of the room, Lily still looked away. That was the final break. And I needed it. I've found peace in small places since then. In morning coffee on my porch. In watching the neighborhood kids ride their bikes down the street. In quiet Sundays where I don't check my phone, waiting for something that won't come. Janine comes by sometimes. She doesn't push, just brings over dinner and sits with me, her presence a reminder that some family still stands solid even when the walls cave in. She told me Lily sent her a wedding photo. She almost showed it to me, but I shook my head. Let her have her story, I said. I'm done trying to fit into it. There's no bitterness in me anymore. No heat, just a cool acceptance. Like realizing a scar has finally stopped itching. Sometimes love doesn't die, it just changes shape. And sometimes, the only way to keep it from devouring you is to walk away from the version that no longer serves you. I didn't raise my daughter to be cruel. I raised her to survive, to succeed, to be proud. Maybe somewhere along the way, she confused pride with polish, love with image. But that's her road to walk now. Mine is simpler. Show up where I'm valued. Speak up when I'm silenced. Walk away when I'm erased. If Lily ever comes back, and I mean really comes back, not out of guilt or obligation, but from a place of truth, I'll be here. My door isn't locked, but it isn't wide open either. Some things require knocking. Some things require apology. And some things don't get rebuilt. That's not cruelty. That's growth. And for the first time in years, I'm standing on the other side of that line, breathing easy. If you've ever been invited somewhere just to be tolerated, not celebrated, you know exactly how heavy that silence can feel. Choosing yourself over family isn't easy, but sometimes it's the only way to keep your spirit intact. Would you have walked away like I did? Or stayed silent to keep the peace? Tell me in the comments. Your story matters, too. And if this one resonated, share it. Maybe someone else out there needs the reminder that dignity isn't a luxury, it's a right.